Thanks for joining us for another TEPCO video presentation on using P6. Today we're going to talk about leveling priorities. If you haven't seen our video already on leveling, you may want to take a look at that first if you're new to leveling. I recently had a conversation with one of the other TEPCO trainers and consultants named Claudio Betrego, and he was pointing out that he uses activity codes in a hierarchical manner to set his leveling. This can become useful if you are doing a turnaround schedule and you need to level your systems based on how operations would like those systems handed back to them for commissioning. Before I get into details on how to do that, I want to go through a few concepts on leveling priorities in general. The example I have on screen here has three activities, activities 1, 2, and 3, and I've set the system activity leveling priority, the 1 through 5 code inside P6, as 1 through 3 on these activities consecutively. And you can see when I leveled that they all leveled out almost like they were in sequence, but they are actually not linked to each other. I'm going to reschedule the project now just to show you how it looks when it's not leveled. So I'll hit the schedule button. The activities, when they're not leveled, they are all running in parallel, and I have a single resource assigned to them, which is causing the resource to be overloaded. And this resource limit is set to basically one person. But the way that the activities are all running in parallel right now, we need 3 people to do those activities. But I've set the limit line to 1, which indicates that we only have 1 person to do these activities. So we're going to rely on P6 to level those activities out to level out the workload for that one resource. So the question is, how do we tell P6 how to prioritize those activities and level them out the way that we want to ensure that the important activities are worked on first? Leveling priorities are one of the parameters that the leveling tool looks at. You also need to make sure you set your resource limits. You need to have logic in place. And typically you want your jobs tied into a final constraint on a finish milestone to tell P6 to level within that particular window of time. If you don't do that and you don't put a constraint on your finish milestone, P6 can level past that, which is okay. It just depends on what kind of technique you're using and what kind of information you're looking for. And once again, our other leveling video can give you more information on that. I'm going to click the leveling button again to show you the priority window. The priorities are down here, and I currently have it set to level based on activity leveling priority, which is the 1 through 5 code here. I've only used 1 through 3 on it, but there are 5 values in there, and that is a code that comes directly in P6. You don't have to create that activity code. It's part of the system. Now, when I level using the activity leveling priority 1 through 5 code, we end up with these results. This is what we first looked at. So the first activity, Activity 1, was set to an activity leveling priority of 1 or top, and P6 brought that in and made sure that it was going to be worked on first, followed by Activity 2 and by Activity 3. Now I want to show you what happens when we level, but we do not identify any sort of leveling priority, whether it's the system code of 1 through 5 or any other code. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to level. Notice how it did not level in the same manner. You could make an assumption that P6 would level by the activity ID if it didn't have any sort of parameters to follow that we've defined. However, that's not the case. The schedule did level, although it didn't level in the same format that we had previously leveled when we were using the activity leveling priority 1 through 5 codes. What P6 does is it looks at the database table IDs for each one of these activities. Those are IDs that we actually don't see. Anytime you create a record of anything in P6, there's an ID associated with it in the Oracle or SQL database tables. I'm going to step away from this exercise for a moment and show you how you can actually use the P6 report editor to identify what those table IDs are. So I'm going to go over to the reports view. And I had pre-built an activities report. I did just use the wizard on this, and all I brought in were the activity IDs and the activity names. However, I'll go ahead and run it, and I brought in another field to show the internal IDs. So I'm going to show you how to get into the report editor and where you would find the fields to create a report and show the internal IDs if for some reason you ever needed them. Back in the reports view, I can right click on a report and select modify, and that'll bring up the P6 report editor. This is what it looks like in the editor. I'm not going to go into any detailed training on the editor here. If you are interested in training on the report editor, some advanced training, you can attend one of our P6 advanced courses here at TEPCO. I built the report initially to show the activity ID and the activity name, but then I added another field for what's called the task ID. Basically, I copied the activity name field up here on the header. I renamed it to internal ID, and then I copied the activity name field down here in the data source, and I changed what I was going to draw back into the report from the database fields. So if I show that to you, this is just the internal ID header. So that's a custom text field. So all I did was I renamed that for internal ID. But down here, this task ID, anytime, or in most cases, anytime you want to reset or change a field in a report, you do it by changing this field in the properties window called the cell field. This one was originally set for activity name, because I had copied from the activity name field that I already had in the report. So I have a field here with activity name on it, and when I hit this drop down for cell field, you're going to see that there's an activity ID. That is the normal activity IDs that we see when we're working in P6. However, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's another activity ID. That is actually not the normal P6 activity ID that we look at, although it is named the same. Watch what happens when I select this one. It says task ID right now. Now I can do a print preview, and you'll see that the internal IDs are bringing back what's called the task underscore ID from the Oracle or SQL tables. Now let's take note of the actual task ID numbers here. I'll blow this up a little bit so you can see it. Notice how we have 39696, 39697, and then 39695. That's the order that they were numbered inside the database tables, although that doesn't really correspond to the activity IDs that we have over here, so not quite in sequence. I'm going to close this window now and close the report editor and go back to the activities view. And you can see how it leveled. It actually leveled based on the task IDs in the database tables. Now, is there any value in using the internal IDs in the database tables for leveling? Probably never. So the point here is that when you are leveling, you have to set a leveling priority, what you're going to level by, whether it's the 1 through 5 activity leveling priority code, or you build an activity code, or maybe you just want to level based on total float. Regardless, you need to set something here, because if you leave it blank, it's going to look at the Oracle task ID numbers and it's going to level based on that, and that's not going to make any sense. The task IDs are typically incrementally created based on the records that you enter and the order that you enter the records. So as you add activities, the IDs are created, the task IDs are created in the background. By the way, those task IDs and the table IDs are associated with every type of entry that you put into P6. So you could actually use the report editor to identify the table IDs for activity codes, for resource assignments, for resource IDs, that sort of thing. So you're not just limited to activity IDs. I'm not sure what you would use those for in your application, but they are there in the background, and you can actually use the report editor to pull them into a report for any type of data in P6. Now let's go back to the level window, and I am going to put activity leveling priority back in as the leveling priority. And I want to point out over here the sort order. You have ascending and descending. So typically you would level the activity leveling priority ascending because it's 1 through 5 and 1 is the top code. You do have ascending or descending as an option there. I'm going to change this leveling priority to an activity code that I previously created called TA_leveling priority. Now this is an activity code, and I'll show you the code in a minute. But look what happened in the sort order. I have ascending, descending, and now I have hierarchical. And the code that I put in is right here, A through C, called TA leveling priority. Just hit the drop down there so you can see that. And I have 3 codes in there, and I also coded each of the activities A through C. If I level using the TA leveling priority code now that I've built and I have it set to ascending, I'm going to level, and you can watch what happens here. It leveled them out ascending, so we have A, B, and C, exactly like how we were using the activity leveling priorities 1 through 3. I want to clarify a couple things about the activity codes and using them to level in an ascending manner. So I'm going to go up to the activity code. Here's the code dictionary, and I have A through C in there. I'm going to take priority A and I'm going to bump it down to the bottom. So now it goes B, C, A, and I'm going to close that. I'll go ahead and reschedule, and then I'm going to level again. Notice how changing the code list and the order of the list did not change how things leveled. It's still leveling ascending because it's looking at A, B, and C regardless of the order that they are in the code list. Now I want to go to the leveling window, and I'm going to change this to hierarchical. I'm going to close, then I'll level it, and watch what happens. Now it's leveling based on hierarchical. So if I go back to the codes list, because I set the codes up to be BCA, it actually leveled based on the order that the codes are in the list here. I don't really have hierarchical codes here, but telling the P6 leveler to level based on hierarchical values still works with just a flat list like what we have here. I'm going to rearrange the codes a little bit more. I'll drop B down and I'll push A up. Now I have CAB. I'm going to close this and I'm going to level again. Keep in mind, still the sort order is hierarchical. And notice how the leveling had changed again because of the order that we had the codes set up as. Let's go back to the leveling window one more time, and I'm going to change the sort order to ascending. Notice how it leveled regardless of the leveling priority order in the list. You can see that the list is CAB. It's still leveled based on the code values ascending. And then if I go back to the level window, I could change it to descending and level, and you'll notice it went in reverse. And back to the level again, and we go to hierarchical again, and level. And now it's leveling based on the hierarchical code values, the order that the codes are in the list. Now you might be asking, why would we do this? Why would we care about the hierarchical codes and the order that they exist inside the code list? The concept here is that you could be using an activity code for systems. Let's say that a refinery has systems 1 through 8, and they have codes for those systems built into P6, so systems 1 through 8. And you've coded all of your activities inside your turnaround or outage file with those system codes. I built a new example here with 8 activities in it, and they're coded with systems 1 through 8 and labeled as systems 1 through 8. You would probably actually name the systems in your environment, so there might be a reaction system or a steam system, that sort of thing. So you would build your codes based on that. But we'll just keep this simple. I'll show you the codes list. Here's a code called TA_systems, and I have systems 1 through 8 there. So now I can go and level these systems. I'm going to change my code to be the TA_systems code, and we'll run it the first time ascending and level. And you'll see that everything leveled out. I'm using the same resource, and I have the resource limit still set to 1. So everything leveled out almost like it's running sequentially. Now I'm going to go and level, but I'm going to change the sort order to hierarchical. And I'm going to level again. You won't see a change yet. Now, if I went to Enterprise Activity Codes And let's say that operation said, hey, we need system 5 back first. All I have to do now is come in here to the code list and bump system 5 to the top. Then they might say, well, we need 4 next, and then we need system 7, and so on. And operations can typically give you the order that they need the systems back in order to start commissioning the systems in the order they need to commission them in order to bring the units back up and running fully. We can rearrange the order of the code list based on how operations prioritizes the systems. So we'll leave it at that right now. I'm going to go back out and level again. Keep in mind I'm leveling based on systems, and I've got the sorting on it to be hierarchical. Now you'll see how it's all scattered. This is because P6 is now looking at the system list in a hierarchical manner rather than looking at it as ascending based on alphanumeric code values. If I chose not to use the TA systems code in a hierarchical manner, but operations identified the order that they needed the systems back in, I would need to use another code, or maybe the 1 through 5 code already built in P6 for activity leveling priority, and I would have to go down to all the activities within a particular system and code them with whatever the priority number was that operations gave me. By using the TA systems code, leveling on it hierarchically, all I have to do is move or rearrange the values list inside of P6, and then P6 will look at that from a hierarchical standpoint to do the leveling. This saves me from having to do extra coding because the system codes are probably already assigned to all of my activities. They've probably been there since the planning stage. I can avoid having to go down and use another code and assign that priority code, for example. I can just use the code, the system code that is already in place and assigned. Another benefit to this approach is in case operations tells us that they need to change something when it comes to the priorities of the system. So let's say that they come back to us later and say, well, we actually are going to need system 6 first. Well, now I don't have to go down and find all of the activities associated with system number 6 and code them with another or a different priority code. I can simply move the system 6 system code to the top of the list. I'll go ahead and do that. So I could take system 6 and bump that to the top of the list, close this window, and the next time I level, P6 is going to try and level and make sure that system 6 takes a priority and gets worked on first. That's the end of this session. Thanks for joining us for this video presented by TEPCO on P6 leveling priority coding. If you want more information on what TEPCO can offer around consulting, scheduling, or training, please visit www.tepco.us. Also, please feel free to respond to this video, and if you have any interest in any other subject areas around P6 or project controls in general, please send us an email and let us know what your interests are. We do listen to our customer base, and we do build our videos based around what we are seeing out there in the environments and what kind of requests we get in. So we do appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you.